Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to Virtual Grand Rounds. I'm your host today, Eric Lim, and we have a distinguished speaker today, Dr. Leonard Lee. This is Premier Education brought to you at no cost, thanks to our sponsors, AstraZeneca, Medtronic, and Medela, the Science of Care. Dr. Lee is an associate professor and medical oncologist at the University of Oxford, making strides in the progress, supporting the UK and the government in developing vaccines for cancer. Without further ado, I'm gonna give you the floor, Leonard. Thank you very much for speaking today.
Okay, thank you, Eric, and thanks for inviting me to this talk. I'm always very excited when I get invited to talk at this Brompton series, and this is a series been going for 6 years, which is really impressive, and this is my second talk. The Bromptons always pioneered the world in terms of respiratory research, and I'm absolutely delighted to talk to everyone about vaccines and immunotherapies in lung cancer. Just in terms of background, I'm at the University of Oxford. I'm a medical oncologist, so I treat late stage cancers, and I'm passionate about the capabilities that we can build together in the NHS. Do my research at one of the world leading immunotherapy research centers at the Centre of Immuno-Oncology. And really, I stand on shoulders of excellence. And because the thing that people don't really realize is that the UK has been leading the world of vaccinology for centuries. And we just need to remember that the first vaccines, that against smallpox, actually was derived in the UK. And that's what's been leading our capability in the space and went on to help us achieve in the cancer vaccine space. And that's just a big group of the team that I work for, who are all really quite incredible people across the university. Okay, um, so where would I start? Well, I've got to give you a hook, and the hook is this. And really, by the end of the talk, I want you to realize three things. Firstly, the importance of your role in the NHS, which is able to make incredibly important things happen. And I put up this picture because we must remember that not 5 years ago, the UK was demonstrating and still does demonstrate its excellence. It's just that you don't hear about it anymore. Just as a reminder for everyone around the world, you've probably seen this picture, but you can't recognize why. But that's Margaret. She was the first person in the world to get a pandemic vaccine, which was developed in record time across the UK from our clinical trials network. And that went on to save millions of lives across the world. And the bottom right is Brian, where we developed our own homegrown product, vaccines made in the UK, tested across the world, and made available to hundreds of countries around the world. It already highlights the fact that the NHS is a great engine for discovery for the world. I think the second thing probably we need to pick up on is that the science in the UK, the scientific base is huge. It's incredibly impactful. No other country in the world is able to bring together so many scientists, connect them with healthcare systems, with technology companies, and we're talking about what are now buzzwords like health tech, med tech, which we are one of the world's best countries for. And this is even more important as you see other countries start to politicize their science policy and strategy. And I'm thinking very largely of our big cousins across the water, where they've been really struggling to deliver in the way that we've been able to. And the third thing that makes the UK very important is that all of us are very much focused on the greater good in the community. And so when you put those three things together, the NHS, technology, and a focus on the greater good, this really, really is great foundations for us to continue to make great strides for lung cancer research, for medical research over the next 10 years. And again, this picture, I put this up because it shows what is possible, what we have succeeded in, what makes us world leading. Really, let me just try and nail home this fact. Have a look at those figures. The dogma up till 2020 is that to develop drugs would take £1 billion and 25 years. So if we are developing drugs today, which may be a breakthrough, we're looking at into the 2040s before they should be deployed. That's a dogma. But vaccines made across Europe and the UK were able to prevent 1.5 billion infections, millions of hospitalizations, and lives saved. And that's really the potential of research. And when it goes fast, when it's impactful. So the question I need to pose to Brompton audience for this virtual grand round, and thank you again, Eric, for bringing us together, is what does lung cancer care look like in 2030? I'm just going to pause for a second to get you to think about that, because we've all lived through great revolutions in terms of respiratory care. But what does lung cancer care look like in 2030? So for the next couple of minutes, what I'm going to do is take you backwards about lung cancer care, how it's evolved, and then try and move you forward in time too, to just give you my idea in my seat of where I think the technology is going to and why we should all be very, very excited about what the future holds. Okay, so just going back a little bit, lung cancer is a major problem. You look at about 50,000 cases every year. And at the moment, there is a slight trend towards earlier stage diagnosis because of what we've been doing across the NHS in terms of targeted lung health checks. And also there is a bit of reducing in incidence as people start to reduce smoking. And why is all that? And what has been progress? 1 second. We've really got to think about the progress in lung cancer care happening over a very, very short period of time. So if I just try and map out what's been happening, why the UK's led along that entire way of lung cancer treatment and the pathway, if we and it really just goes through these 4 milestones in my head anyway. In the 1950s, you've got to remember that everyone used to smoke at that stage. People used to believe that smoking aerates the lung and keeps them healthy. It's unbelievable when now we think about it. But it was due to critical advances by Professor Richard Dole, who was able to outline from a epidemiological study of medical healthcare professionals, i.e., doctors and nurses, that actually of those who smoked, those were the ones who were getting lung health conditions and lung cancer. And he went across against the global tobacco industry, which was very, very profitable. And he put medical research out there from the UK, which showed that a clear association with smoking and lung cancer. That's powerful and phenomenal, and really the power of data. And that came out of the UK. Fast forwarded to 2007, and the UK became one of the first tier countries in the world to ban smoking indoors. And that largely solved the problem of passive smoking, or people going to restaurants and children, non-smokers, inhaling the smoke of other smokers. Again, that was one of the first tier countries, although to be honest, the first country that actually moved was Ireland a couple of months before us. In 2020, targeted lung health checks were rolled out across the NHS. And what you're seeing here is increasing number of people being diagnosed at an earlier stage. And just to give you an idea how successful this is, and I know I should be flagging this to respiratory doctors because there's a lot of incidental lots of idiopathic fibroses or interstitial lung disease that we don't fully know what to do. But in terms of cancer, you're picking up 10,000 additional cancers since the program began, which is fantastic. And most of these are when you can treat them. So what the latest stat shows is that 3 in 4 of cancers picked up by targeted lung health checks are at an early stage, which is completely at odds how cancer's normally diagnosed, where 3 in 4 are at a late stage. So for these people, we have given them increasing chances at long-term survival, which is absolutely phenomenal. And also going ahead to the current year, well, next year is a really exciting time because we've got the first smoke-free generation that will emerge. Every child that is born from 2009, from next year onwards, will never be able to smoke. And that potentially is going to have a big effect in terms of lung cancer. But how big an effect? Well, I mentioned earlier before that actually currently were static about 50,000 cases per year, but that should drop to about 15,000 years ago a year. That's what the forecasts are showing. So approximately less than a third of the work that's required if you look into the future. And that's what we're looking at when you try and forecast the decades ahead. I won't be here in 2075, I don't think. Well, I hope I will be. But what you're able to see here is that for the next 20 years or so, we're going to see a fair level of workload before you start seeing a drop off of cancers as that smoke-free generation comes through. And that's the great, interesting point about lung cancer care. Okay, so that is about the prevalence of cancer dropping and that is a great success for lung cancer. But what do we do now? So it's 2006. Well, I put this slide up because since 2010, again, most of our lifetimes, um, the whole field of cancer care has been revolutionized by a new form of cancer treatment called checkpoint inhibitors. What are they? Well, it's basically a way of revving up the immune system into overdrive by blocking the binding between a cancer cell and a T cell using what we call a monoclonal antibody. What this table basically shows is a scale of benefit across my field of medical oncology. So what you're seeing in this column over here on the left is the cancer subtypes. Going downwards, bowel cancer, skin cancer, kidney cancer, a form of bladder cancer, and in grey I flagged the different types of lung cancer. In the middle column, I've listed the drugs, and in the third column I've listed the survival of these patients without checkpoint inhibitors. And what I've done is really try to outline the benefits of these new drugs. How much time gain have these drugs given on average? If you remember, most drugs in cancer care, when it's given in a late stage setting, metastatic, we're sort of trying to prevent a prolonged survival, and it's normally off the order of a couple months. 6 months would be fantastic survival benefit for most metastatic patients. And what you can see here is that for many different types of lung cancer, we are buying a lot more time. So for non-small lung cancer, you're looking at additional survival of a year. For non-squamous, about a year again. Although you're not quite seeing so much benefits in the other rarer types of lung cancers like pleural mesothelioma or extensive small cell lung cancer. But this has been driving huge advances over the last decade and a half. And if I just zoom in on this one again, what this points to is a paradigm. And if you're going to hold any paradigm in your head, think of this balancing act that medical oncologists are trying to do. We're trying to balance nowadays, particularly in lung cancer, tumor growth, which is what all cancers do without any treatment. It will just keep doubling. It will keep splitting and spreading versus tumor immunity. And that's trying to get your own immune system to try to control the cancer and by activating its immune cells, and it can start to pick off stray cells and kill them. For most patients with stable disease, this seesaw is exquisitely balanced, and you've got what we call stable disease, where the tumor is growing as fast, but still being controlled by a tumor, the anti-tumor immune response. Your body's own immune response, which controls bacteria, viruses, which is now controlling your cancer. Eventually it tips, and as you can see at the top, it can control it for an additional period of time before the tumor evades the immune system. Okay, so I promised you I would talk about the future now. So let me go talk to the future as I see it. And also just a bit of recap about why in the news you keep hearing about cancer vaccines and the UK's world-leading position in this space. Okay, so the story of this advance is probably does come out of the pandemic, where many clinical trialists, many doctors, scientists all came together under an idea that if the UK can deliver pandemic gains, that there will be a legacy of it, and that actually our scientific capabilities will start to rise. And I know that this is just a this is BBC News article, but actually one of the things just to say here is that as a nation, we were tasked to take the success of our pandemic vaccine and apply it to other priorities, including cancer research, to transform lives again around the world. So what's happened since 2021? Well, we started to break down what it means to make cancer vaccines, and we started to break it down into the following steps. Can we get the tumor out of a patient? Can we sequence it? Can we use AI to work out what in the cancer is abnormal and what can we immunize against? And can we make the next jump and vaccinate a patient against that cancer? Can we then make it? 4 simple steps, and if you can solve that, then you've got the potential to make cancer vaccines. The analogy is completely the same what happened during the pandemic. The Chinese sequenced the virus, SARS-CoV-2, and then made it, and we were then able to, countries like ours were then able to put that sequence into a vaccine and make a off-the-shelf vaccine that everyone had. The trick for cancer is that everyone's cancer is slightly different, and therefore you've got to probably got to make a personalized cancer vaccine for them. By that I mean a vaccine designed for their mutations, designed specifically for them. What's been happening since? Well, a couple of years later after that, in addition to getting trials up and running, partnerships were launched, and people started to invest in the UK, creating jobs and headquarters to boost cancer vaccine research. I was very glad to work with these fantastic civil servants who were able to bring in big partners like Moderna and BioNTech, but also other pharmaceutical companies now entering like GSK, who are now moving into the UK because of our capabilities for cancer vaccine research. I do want to show this video because it's a quick explainer, and the BBC does explain things much better than me. So Eric, let me know if you can't hear anything, but I think you can hear this. It's only 3 minutes.
Thousands of people with cancer in the UK could be given a personalised vaccine treatment which uses the same technology that's in current COVID jabs. The hope is it could either stop the cancer spreading or prevent it from coming back. It's still in its early stages, but it's happening because of an agreement between the UK government and the German pharma company BioNTech. Our medical editor Fergus Walsh is here to explain. Fergus.
Thanks, Sophie. Vaccines using messenger ribonucleic acid, mRNA, have proved highly effective against COVID. The same technology is being applied to treat cancer, a far more complex disease.
And so that's an explanation of what's been happening, which is actually quite revolutionary in terms of bringing partnerships to get technologies which the NHS needs. After that, what you can see here is the Cancer Vaccine Advance, which started across all the different trial sites, across the universities, across the startups. And this has really been the firing gun for our great mRNA Cancer Vaccine Advance. And it's been incredibly successful. The idea here is that our community in the cancer research field will pull together to put 10,000 people through trials by 2030. The latest statistics I heard is that already 3,000 people have gone through cancer vaccine trials, and for many research centres, it now becomes a standard of care for cancer patients going through their centres. There's an aspiration that there'll be benefits across many different subtypes, including lung cancer at both an early and late stage. And the idea here is that where other countries may choose not to prioritise vaccine research, even though it's cheap, easy to make, and affordable, we will take the leadership position here and stimulate a global technology advance. What we're seeing now, a couple of years down the line, is that of the different trends that are coming through, we are seeing that lung cancer is an area of focus for startup companies, for biotech companies, And these are all the 237 cancer vaccine trials that we were able to unearth. And there are some there that you expect, like melanoma and bowel cancer, but lung cancer is really making a lot. It's a big focus of the world's research community, making up 15.2% of cancer vaccine trials, which are big and great, because lung cancer is a cancer where you're extending survival by about a year, but then what do you do after that? You need something to keep boosting the immune system. And many people are now thinking, well, maybe that's cancer vaccines, or do you give the cancer vaccines after surgery to clear up micrometastatic disease? This is where people are thinking at the moment. This graph basically shows trial activity. The rest of the world is sort of like, we're not sure about vaccines. We believe that other therapies are out there, and we're going to have like a multi research strategy. But the UK has really embraced it and therefore moved into world leading position for this form of research, which is fantastic. You've got to specialise, you've got to be good at something. The UK is very good at cancer vaccine research. And that is now why you're seeing all these pictures. This is why you're seeing patients want to talk about their successes, and getting the opportunity to be participating in research. The trials infrastructure booming back into life after being shut off for many years in 2020, and doctors being very proud of their work. And again, this is a success of having a national healthcare system where you've got standardized research frameworks. And this is what's really getting the media excited, because it's one of our strengths. And if you are interested in government policy, well, it's definitely worth reading these three ones, which is our life sciences sector plan, our model industrial strategy, and a 10-year health plan. You can also put the 10-year cancer plan too, because it's really started to highlight the potential of this technology and our world leading position. And that's great. But is that the solution? Is the technology already there? And so now I really want to move this talk in the last couple of minutes in the future, because this really does excite me. Because what we're seeing now is that if you look at a very difficult to treat cancer like pancreatic cancer, this graph, my only data graph, shows the issue. If you try and treat a pancreatic cancer patient with one of these state-of-the-art mRNA personalized vaccines to their mutation, half the patients do develop an immune response. And that's phenomenal. And that's on the left-hand side here in the yellow bars. But the thing to note about these first-generation cancer vaccines is it doesn't work for everyone. And you can see here the other half of patients where they don't develop an immune response. So it's good technology which can activate and direct the immune response of what that cancer look like, but it doesn't work for everyone. So what do we do about it? So my team has gone back to the literature and reviewed all the 100 tools that's happened over the last 30 years. And we're starting to see actually there's been increasing sophistication of how you pick what goes in a cancer vaccine. And I've started to realize that this may be the issue that must be cracked to make the next generation of cancer vaccines. Each cancer's got about 10,000 mutations. So the question then becomes, consider vaccines quite small, which of these 20 do you put into a vaccine? And how do we move this field faster to make better predictions? In recent years, a tool has come along, artificial intelligence, which has made this ability to make predictions much, much faster than before. And that's really started to think about how do we now use the latest technology in AI to make critical advances for lung cancer research and cancer research as a whole. They did very simple things. They put a lot of data into their models. They used a GPT transformer model, and they trained it making tokens to make predictions. And nowadays, this is very accurate, much less likely to hallucinate, and actually, in many places, surpassing human ability. So what does this mean for cancer vaccine research? Can we use this here? Well, the answer, if you look back 2 years ago, would have probably been no. You can't do that because we cannot train models in the UK. But because of the work by the amazing civil servants, they had the great foresight to try and move data center so we can train AI models in the UK now. So just what the Americans did for language, we might be able to do in the cancer vaccine space. And therefore, if you look out from outside of hospitals, you will see new sovereign data centers popping around the UK. I've covered this, and there's now two big data centers which are world leading, which have just emerged in the UK in recent years, and they've been upgraded. There's Dawn in Cambridge, and there's Isambard AI in Bristol. And this map that I've tried to pull out here is all the great supercomputers around the world, with size really point at power. But note, the UK ones, whilst they're not the biggest in the world, you don't need to be big. You just need to be able to direct enough compute or GPUs at the problem. And whilst many of the ones around the world are being used for defense purposes or particle physics or meteorology, the ones in the UK are being used for science and now being used for medical research. And that's really exciting. Um, and there's also this policy paper that came out, which is why we've got supercomputers in the UK. And that's to make sure that the UK scientific body will maintain its position of leadership. And look at mission one here. We will accelerate drug discovery to make trial-ready drugs within 100 days and deploy our technologies faster. So what you're seeing here is different fields coming together here. Vaccinology with NHS, with AI, really, really moving the dial forward. Okay. So again, how to use ChatGPT or transformer technology to improve that field that I'm passionate about, which is directing the immune response at cancer. Well, it's very, very simple. You take the model here and you move it directly, but rather than putting input data, you use genomic data. Rather than harvesting all the internet, you use all the genomic data that's out there and you try and make a prediction here, what will make the best immune response. So I'm really excited because when we wrote to the Department of Science, Innovation and Trade and replied to UKRI, we weren't sure if we were going to get this because up till now, cancer research didn't really use AI or supercomputers. Well, it did, but like the older form, like random forest and neural networks, but weren't using transformer technology. And we were able to pivot in this space about August time last year. And this is what we've been doing. We've been harvesting a lot of data. We've been pruning, cleaning, and putting them into the UK supercomputer. These are people who consented to use the data research. And we've now got big models which are growing. As of March, it's about 600 million data points. We started to test them across different types of cancer. And what you're seeing here is that on the right is dark blue, which is our model. On the left is the dots here, the existing models. And what you'll see here is you do look like you're able to make better predictions than current tools, which are using older or smaller data sets. And that's great. Although it probably doesn't surprise people that AI works, but it's making better prediction than we ever had before. And so where have we got to now? Well, we've got to a model which has been trained across 33 tumor types, all fine-tuned to look at T-cell responses. And it looks like it's going to be maybe the foundation of a second generation cancer vaccine, which is now using AI to make better predictions. But what's the big idea? Well, I'd love to carry on and tell this story because I'm quite excited by where lung cancer research is going now. We all know that there used to be chemotherapy for everyone. Then there was targeted therapies like EGFR targeted therapies. Then there was immunotherapies. But what this space of personalized drugs means, the ability to make a vaccine for that particular patient, means that a new form of drug therapy is now emerging. And that's what I call intelligent therapy. And what do I mean by this? Well, it means that a drug that could continuously improve so that a patient that you treat as a medical oncologist or seen by a surgeon improves the drug for the next patient. And what do I mean by this? Well, to make cancer vaccines is relatively simple. You take a sample, you sequence it, and you make a vaccine for them. Well, what happens if you put a supercomputer in this model and you create an ever-improving loop? So we know that ChatGPT's got better over time. So the question now becomes, well, what happens if you put a supercomputer there and you test its predictions and you penalize it for making the wrong prediction and you reward it for doing the right prediction? Well, if you do that in real time, as computers are able to do and do updates, you've got an ever-improving drug design platform. And just to give you an idea of the problem that we're trying to solve now, is that if you take the premise that drugs are able to improve over time because you are quantifying the immune response's predictions, then you've got to be able to do that experiment. And it's a 12-day experiment called an ELISpot, and it's quite time consuming. So how do we scale this up? We want to make an improving drug platform so that the predictions should keep improving. Well, this is how we thought about it at University of Oxford. We've got to automate. The field of AI is now moving into the field of robotics. I never expected this, but it kind of makes sense. Because with the setup we started to deploy in our lab, when you automate it, you can do these experiments overnight and at weekends, and you're not reliant on research assistants or PhD students staying late. And so what we're seeing here is using just very, very simple automation, you can start to move the process to getting scientists to achieve more than they've previously done. And that will create the data and keep improving the drug development platform to make better cancer vaccines. I want to show you another very, very short video of what this looks like in Oxford at the moment. So thanks to Aria, we built an AI scientist. So if you were to ask your own ChatGPT whether it can do experiments for you to make better cancer vaccine targets, it will tell you all the reasons why it can't do it. But we've created an agent, Chiara, which now controls our robotics and is able to do that for us. So if you envisage now what the labs of the future look like, well, I think they look like this. Fully automated, gearing the UK to deliver faster research than ever before. And that really starts to increase the throughput of experiments to about 20-fold efficacy. So where would I finish? Well, there's a lot of information to take on, and this has really been our ventures in terms of AI in the UK. But the first thing I would say is that a cancer advance is occurring at the moment, and lung cancer will be one of the first fields to be transformed by it. AI, which is accelerating many different sectors, is definitely accelerating the world of cancer research. And it's been an absolute honor to try and pioneer this in the UK. And this is probably my most important statement. The success of the UK is dependent on the NHS and of all the work that's happening around the cancer centres, including in Brompton, and it will power scientific discoveries in the year ahead. Thank you very much for listening. Eric.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lennard. It's amazing work that you're doing and leading, the world in this. Maybe it's time for just one or two questions. Adrian Marchbank is asking, when you sequence like viruses, it's easy because it's homogeneous, but when you're sequencing cancers, it's much more heterogeneous. In the current advances or current state, do you need large amounts of surgical tissue to be able to get good, sequences that are usable?
Good question, Eric. So you don't need that much DNA nowadays to do genetic sequencing. And the Brompton was one of those centres which participated in a 100,000 genome project. So we know it's not a big amount of sample. It's about 5 millimeters by, well, no, it's a core, a simple, tiny little core that's required. Biopsy samples are probably not great enough, but a little core in FFPE or fresh tissue is required. So that's, I don't know, millimeter. It doesn't need to be big.
I'm going to push you to the next question. With current moves in circulating tumor DNA, people are making diagnosis of cancer before it becomes clinically visible. Do you think it will be then the future direction? So I noted that you try to make some predictions for the next 25 years. And for me, I'm thinking ctDNA, sequencing, vaccine, the cancer doesn't even actually emerge or surface.
Thanks, Eric. That's a really good question. Yeah, lung cancer again, amongst your surgeons and your diagnostician respiratory doctors, the leading world in terms of circulating free DNA. We can now diagnose what type of lung cancer you've got by that blood test, and it's quick, easy. It's a simple blood draw, no bronchoscopy, no thoracoscopy, all that. I do believe that you'll be able to call cancer vaccines and design it off circulating free DNA. As long as you've got the abnormalities, you can make a vaccine. What I'm not sure at the moment is enough data there? Um, does it give you all the mutations or only give you a fraction of it? That's what the field needs to look at. But yeah, that could be a future where you diagnose people early, you vaccinate them early, and that's been probably the 10-year plan of where we might get to eventually.
That sounds really amazing. I mean, imputing your pre-trained transformer using circulating tumor DNA data with a bank of actual FFP tissue and live tissue, and then training it to sequence or develop a new vaccine sounds to me like the most phenomenal or greatest advance that's going to come out from the UK.
And we need the Brompton to activate and do even more research in this space and make sure it becomes a great success.
Well, thank you very much, Leonard, for leading the field. I'm sure we want to hear more about from you next year because this field, artificial intelligence on its own, changes every week. The improvements are exponential, and what you've stated from your first talk and now has, strides of improvement. And we're certainly very excited, definitely to hear more from you next year. Next week, we have Dr. Calvin Ng talking to us about the diagnostic and therapeutic horizons of robotic bronchoscopy. So once again, thanks to our sponsors, and thank you very much, Leonard, for leading the world in this area and for coming to speak to us today.
Thanks, Eric. Lovely to speak to you again.
Bye-bye.